It's the middle of 1943. For 2 years, the seas have been dominated by German U-boats, disrupting supply lines and threatening the very survival of Britain. What if we told you that the Royal Navy came up with a solution so crazy it would make you go, huh? Well, buckle up, because we're about to show you what happens when you mix sawdust and water together and let your imagination run wild. Welcome to my channel. Today, we will see if a warship can be made out of ice. The year is 1940. World War II has been raging across Europe and the world for a year. The Battle of Britain rages in the skies above Britain, where German air power is challenged by the few but brave pilots of the Royal Air Force. At sea, however, the story is quite different. The Germans have unleashed their wolf packs of U-boats, which are sinking merchant ships left and right, causing severe supply issues for Britain. This cannot continue. Something needs to be done, and fast. Enter Project Habakkuk, a proposed design for an aircraft carrier that could not sink, or at least not easily. The idea may sound insane, but this concept actually made it all the way to prototype. And the best part, this icy vessel would be 5 times stronger than steel, yet much cheaper to produce. That's because the main component of this wonder material was not steel, but sawdust. By mixing sawdust with water and letting it freeze, the British hoped they had created the perfect solution to their maritime woes. In fact, the idea goes back to 1917, when a Canadian artillery officer named Gerald Bales discovered that a mixture of sawdust and water would freeze into a strong block of ice. Bales saw this as an opportunity to create an aircraft carrier that could not be sunk. He envisioned ships that were made entirely of sawdust ice and powered by steam engines. His plans were submitted to the Admiralty, but they weren't interested. In fact, he would later be reprimanded for submitting his design without permission. But Bales was onto something here. A lightweight, yet incredibly tough material was desperately needed, and it had to be made from readily available resources. Steel was too heavy and, well, regular ice was too fragile. But Bales had stumbled upon a new material that was light enough to float and tough enough to withstand a direct hit from a German torpedo. Not only that, but the sawdust ice would also insulate the ship's internals, making it easier to maintain a consistent temperature for the aircraft and their onboard personnel. Plus, it was dirt cheap to produce compared to steel ships, costing just $1 per ton versus $6 for steel. And there was no shortage of sawdust in Britain. The country's many sawmills produced more than was needed for construction, leaving them with an excess of sawdust that would otherwise be discarded. But how did the Admiralty respond to this brilliant idea? They laughed, of course, but when push came to shove, they knew they needed all the help they could get. After all, the U-boat crisis was reaching a critical point, so the Admiralty agreed to fund some small-scale experiments to test the viability of the idea. These tests showed that the sawdust ice blocks were indeed strong enough to support the weight of an aircraft and their crew. Additionally, it was easy to shape the blocks into large slabs for use in shipbuilding. After proving that the material was feasible, a full-size prototype was ordered in 1941. However, the following year, as technology improved, the Admiralty grew skeptical. Still, they agreed to fund another experiment, but with a catch. Instead of building a full-size ship, they wanted the engineers to construct a 1/6 scale model first. If it met their expectations, then perhaps they would greenlight the full project. As it turned out, the model performed exceptionally well, exceeding everyone's expectations. It was able to bear weights of over 80 tons without breaking, equivalent to the weight of 3 fully loaded aircraft. This was far beyond what was required for the project's goals. However, it was at this point that the Admiralty decided to pull the plug on Project Habakkuk. They believed that the war in Europe would be over soon, and that by then, better and cheaper materials would become available. Therefore, it didn't seem worth the time and effort to invest in such a strange vessel. Also, other solutions seemed more promising. One such solution was the development of new types of merchant ships that were specifically designed to withstand U-boat attacks. With these advancements, the Admiralty felt that there was no longer a need to invest in such a risky venture. Although the program was cancelled, it still left its mark on history. One of the prototype vessels, the second HMS Cyclops, was used as a test ship for the British Eastern Pacific and Arctic convoys. It was eventually scrapped in 1946 after suffering severe engine damage. The remaining prototype, the third HMS Cyclops, was taken to Loch Fada in Scotland for further testing, but it was ultimately scrapped before it could be completed. The Royal Navy had considered several designs for aircraft carriers made of sawdust ice, each with its unique features and challenges. Let's take a closer look at each one. The first design, known as the WWII, featured a single deck with a short bow and a long rectangular stern. The ship was flat-bottomed and had a displacement of 23,500 tons. Its hull was made of sawdust ice, while the upper works, including the bridge and gun platforms, were constructed from steel. The WWII was designed to carry 36 Blackburn Rock 2P aircraft, which were modified to handle carrier operations. The Rock 2P was a twin-engine torpedo bomber with a top speed of 235 miles per hour. It had a range of 612 miles and could carry one 18-inch high-explosive bomb. The Blackburn Rock was chosen for the WWII project because it was the most suitable aircraft available at the time. However, the type was obsolete by 1942 and would not have been competitive against German aircraft. The second design, known as the WWII, featured two decks with angled bows and a short stem. It had a displacement of 27,500 tons and was designed to carry 48 Fairey Barracuda aircraft. The Barracuda was a more modern and capable aircraft than the Blackburn Rock. It was a single-seat, single-engine torpedo bomber with a top speed of 270 miles per hour. It had a range of 730 miles and could carry two 18-inch high-explosive bombs. The WWII's design also included an armored flight deck and a watertight compartment for the aircraft fuel. Despite the promising designs, neither aircraft carrier was ever built. The WWII project was ultimately abandoned in favor of more conventional and practical solutions to the U-boat threat. But what if the project had been finished and deployed in time? How would it have performed in battle against the Germans? The real answer is probably that it wouldn't have worked. But here's a fun little what-if. When it comes to weapons, larger isn't always better. Take the battleship, for example. It seems logical to pack as many guns as possible onto a ship to maximize firepower. But in reality, there's a limit to how much firepower a ship can handle. Too many guns and you risk damaging the ship itself. For example, the German battleship Scharnhorst was equipped with 11 150mm guns. But during the Battle of Norway in 1940, the recoil from these guns caused the ship to tilt dangerously. Similarly, the Soviet battleship Gangut had 12 180mm guns. But during a battle in 1941, a malfunction in the firing mechanism led to 4 of the guns being completely disabled. On the other hand, the Japanese battleship Yamato, which was designed to pack the most firepower possible, suffered from instability issues due to the sheer weight of its 18 460mm guns. If Britain had deployed a fleet of aircraft carriers made of ice, they might have encountered similar problems. The carriers would have been massive, displacing tens of thousands of tons of water, and the weight of the sawdust ice hull could have strained the ship's structure. Additionally, launching aircraft from a deck made of sawdust ice would have been tricky. The carriers were designed to operate in cold weather, but as anyone who has tried to walk on ice knows, it can be slippery. The engines and machinery involved in launching aircraft would have added to the complexity of the operation, and it's likely that the entire structure could have buckled under the strain. Not to mention the potential problems that could arise from using organic material for a warship. Sawdust, after all, is not just wood chips. It contains resin and oils that can go bad over time. This could have led to the weakening of the hull and an increased risk of catastrophic failure. Moreover, the carriers would have been slow and cumbersome, making them easy targets for German U-boats. The Admiralty's concerns about the practicality and cost-effectiveness of the project were therefore justified. While the idea of using sawdust ice as a building material for warships was certainly creative, it was ultimately not feasible. We hope you enjoyed learning about this crazy idea that might have changed naval history forever. If you want to learn more about other wacky inventions like this one, stay tuned for more updates.